Hello, everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan. After a few weeks of breathless news with HBO Max, this one's going to go back to formula a little bit. We got a little bit of a slower episode, but that also means that we're going to talk about box office numbers from China, box office numbers from Japan, what's going to be happening in movie theaters this weekend. So we still have lots of stuff to throw at you today that I'm excited to talk about. Before we start, though, I just wanted to mention I was very honored to be nominated for several of the Schmodown Awards. They were announced today. If you know me, you know that I love to participate in the movie trivia Schmodown. And there's something that I wanted to plug for people that also enjoy the Schmodown and that may not know that over on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Dan Murrell, I'm actually going to do this week a full breakdown of my experience in the Schmodown Spectacular, which is the big event that ends every season. I had a great singles title match against Adam Collins, and I'm excited to share my thoughts and break down that match beat by beat. It's something that I only do over on Patreon. So before we started, I wanted to throw that right out there just because the Schmodown is very much what people are talking about right now, free agency, etc., and I'd love to see it over on Patreon. Let's see what was going on at the box office this past weekend, and there was a new release here in North America. Monster Hunter, which has been moving up and down the release schedule around Christmas, actually ended up on the schedule for this past weekend, and it did okay business. I think the major problem being, even when you're putting your release date out a few weeks in advance, nobody really knew exactly what the situation was going to be here, particularly in the United States with COVID and everything else. There are not a whole lot of theaters open, and it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of enthusiasm, at least for seeing Monster Hunter in theaters on opening weekend. It actually only did a little better than The Croods and New Age, which has been open since Thanksgiving and is also available to watch at home. So not a huge splash with Monster Hunter. As a matter of fact, expectation was that it could perhaps open much bigger than it did. When I say much, I mean around $4 million instead of around $2.2 million. But that is going to be a theme as we talk about the opening of another even bigger movie in international markets. It seems like the expectation, even modest expectations, of this COVID box office are not being met currently. We're going to break down some of those reasons why in just a little bit. There was some movement on the 2020 domestic box office chart, and we talked about this last week. Everything stays the same, pretty much in the top 9. Fantasy Island, which I think was a January release that has held on to that number 10 spot all year long, was finally displaced by The Croods, A New Age, at number 10. If you had in your books that Fantasy Island was going to be a top 10 movie until the next to last weekend of December, then you probably just cashed a huge bet, because nobody else would have said that. There was also no movement really at all on the worldwide box office chart, but there's one movie in particular that we've been talking about. It moved up into the number 5 spot not too long ago, and that is Demon Slayer the movie. It is still there at 5, still making a bunch of money, but there is another chart where it has been making some huge gains. And the last couple months, this has been something we've tracked. And Japanese box office, again, New Year's Eve 2019, if you'd asked what I was going to be doing in 2020, tracking the Japanese box office. So, I mean, yeah, that does seem like something I would do, but not something that I think I would follow for that long. But we do have a bit of a historic moment on the horizon because, well, there's been a little bit of gamesmanship here, because Demon Slayer technically would already have surpassed Spirited Away for the number 1 movie of all time in Japan. However, since we last looked at this chart, they updated the grosses for Spirited Away to reflect a re-release that happened, I believe, last summer. So that total went up a little bit, but it's not going to matter because Demon Slayer is just about $5 million away from taking that number 1 spot. Demon Slayer is going to be the new number 1 movie, the highest grossing film of all time in Japan, supplanting Spirited Away. And it just goes to show you, when you look at box office numbers, the stories can be vastly different from region to region, and that is being underscored more so than ever, where we have very few theaters here open in North America, and yet we are setting all-time records at the Japanese box office. But it is another big movie that has been drawing most of the attention as far as the international box office goes, and that is Wonder Woman 1984, which rolled out in 32 international markets this past weekend ahead of its release here in North America with the new hybrid release strategy. And early results have not been extremely positive looking at where it's opened and how much it's pulled in. It pulled in about $38.5 million, as I mentioned, from 32 international markets. That's much lower than than expected. And I don't mean expectations that were set pre-pandemic. I mean expectations that were set going into the weekend was that it would make much more. And as was the case with a few other films this year post-pandemic, with the other countries' markets internationally being open a little bit more here than in North America, China was the market that actually underwhelmed expectations the most. Wonder Woman 1984 opened to about $18.8 million in China. That's less than half the opening of the original film. Also lower than the openings of both Tenet and Mulan earlier this summer. And you'll remember that the opening weekend for Mulan was widely considered to be a huge disappointment. Obviously, for different reasons, Disney had very specifically targeted the Chinese market. But still, if you're looking at Wonder Woman, the original opened $38.7 million in China, eventually made $90 million in China. And we're looking potentially, as they're projecting out what it could make. Remember that box office is much more front-loaded at the Chinese box office than it is in most places in the world. So even though Wonder Woman 1984 made about half of the original film's opening weekend there, people are saying that it could eventually gross about a third of the original movie, so perhaps around $30 million. That's obviously not where Warner Brothers would want that to be. This is it is the biggest lucrative box office market that is open for business, and it doesn't look like Wonder Woman 1984 is going to bring a hugely impressive gross, even with the adjusted expectations from the 2020 times that we're living in. So then the question becomes why, and there are a few operating theories as to why. Some of them we're not going to know for quite a while. One of them is, strangely enough, the weather. As a matter of fact, there's been unprecedented demand for energy in some parts of China because there is a brutal cold snap that is ongoing. So the theory is perhaps that may have depressed turnout a little bit at the box office. Another question mark is marketing. Wonder Woman 1984 reportedly was not marketed as thoroughly and to some people's opinions, not as well as the first film. They certainly were marketing it aggressively, but we are in times where perhaps studios are being a little more thrifty, cannot quite pump as much into their marketing budgets as they would have normally. So it could be that the marketing for Wonder Woman 1984 was not quite where it needed to be to get the kind of number. There's also something called the import factor. And when we looked at that chart of the highest grossing films of 2020, one thing that you'll notice is that Chinese audiences have post-pandemic even turned out to see big Chinese releases. So it could be that perhaps if they're picking their movie-going options, given the environment and everything that's happening, that Chinese audiences may be opting to go see Chinese-made films more than they're opting to see imported films. However, one thing that works against that theory is that there is a huge Chinese film called The Rescue that also opened this weekend. It was the #1 film at the box office in China this weekend, but it did not perform nearly as high as box office analysts had expected it to. So I think the import factor may be one thing that is working against Hollywood films, but I also think that we're looking at an overall depression and smaller number of people at the Chinese box office this past weekend across all types of films than perhaps they even expected. That may lean more into the weather factor. Also, there is the COVID factor. It may just be that there are fewer people going to the theater because there are clusters of COVID that reportedly have broken out here and there. Perhaps people are being more choosy. The fact of the matter is that even if theaters are open, you're not going to have the same robust audience because some people just aren't going to go. And I think that a lot of theater chains here in the United States may well be looking at China, especially right now, to see what their futures could be, because if they're able to open fully, the big question mark is going to be HBO Max and everything notwithstanding. Let's talk about a movie like Black Widow, which is slated to go out still theatrically. Will the audience come back? It could be that we're seeing signs in the Chinese market that, along with a combination of other factors, that there are still some audience members that don't quite feel comfortable returning to the theater. So that's something that's going to play out on a longer term. The other thing that really could be a factor is the movie itself. When you look at the reaction to Wonder Woman 1984 across Chinese social media, etc., it seems like it was not an overall negative reaction, but there were some criticisms that the movie was too long, that there wasn't enough action in the film, and this was stuff that got out in advance of the film's release when they had been doing some sneak previews for fans. So it could just be that For whatever reason, the movie itself is not really connecting with audiences. People had heard about that. And then, like I said, when you combine that with so many of these other factors that are happening right now, it led to a depression of the overall turnout for Wonder Woman 1984 at the box office this weekend. This does cement the fact that it's very likely, in fact, almost a certainty at this point, that as far as the box office run goes, that Wonder Woman 1984 is not going to break even. Deadline had a report that came out right around the time they adjusted the release strategy that said that in order for Wonder Woman 1984 to break even just at the box office, it would need to do about 40% more than Tenet had done, which was around $350 million. When you crunch those numbers, that's about $500 million just to break even. I don't think we're going to see that number here, especially given the numbers in China, especially given the situation here in the United States in regard to theaters. Of course, the one thing we don't know is how much additional revenue is HBO Max going to bring. The specific thing with HBO Max that is very hard to track, and this is what makes it hard when I'm trying to look at the numbers and see, is that because they existed previously as HBO and already had an existing customer base, they had HBO Now, they offered that service to their existing customers. So if you had HBO, you had HBO Max, you just have to activate your service. So when they're reporting new numbers, and this was something that I looked at last week, they will report activations. They'll say, like, we had 12 million new activations this quarter, for example. What's hard to discern there is how many of those activations are existing customers who are just going over to HBO Max, and how many of those people are new customers, new money, that are subscribing to HBO Max. And that's the number that you would probably want. It's not the people that already have HBO that you care about necessarily. It's how many people are coming over that were not subscribed before. So I'm going to be looking at those numbers, and we'll see when they release them. But also, if you are reading reporting about HBO Max, one thing to keep in mind is if they're saying activations, hopefully they will distinguish. And if it's a good number, I think they're going to. New customers is the number that you want to know. So we will see what HBO Max wants to do. We have seen with a lot of these streamers and streaming services that if it's a great number, they'll make a big deal out of it. If it's not a great number, you'll never hear about it. I still don't think we've heard how Mulan did on Disney Plus. Now they're doing that with Raya and the Last Dragon, that same Premiere Plus access model. So it must not have been a total disaster, but I feel like if it had been a massive success, Disney probably would have said something. These are the challenges of being a numbers guy at this point. You're kind of at the mercy of the studios when it comes to so many of these metrics for success and failure. I will very much be keeping an eye as we go into the holiday break on Wonder Woman's numbers. The one thing to caveat is that Warner Brothers, and they did this with Tenet as well, will not be reporting daily numbers. As a matter of fact, we're not going to know how Wonder Woman is doing until Sunday. The other studios that have been putting out films, Disney, Universal, etc., even with re-releases, have been providing numbers, daily numbers starting on Saturday. So you'll know how the movie did on Friday, you'll know how it's doing on Saturday, and then they'll report their final estimates on Sunday. Warner Brothers will not be doing that. They will only be reporting one final number on Sunday, so we may not know how it does day to day. But $10 million plus is a win right now if you're Wonder Woman 1984 and if you're Warner Brothers. However, the numbers that the WB execs and the AT&T execs really want to keep an eye on are those internals that are coming in from the performance of HBO Max. And unfortunately, those are numbers that we are not going to have access to for quite a while. One rare piece of good news, if you're a theater owner, in particular if you're an independent theater owner, is that a COVID relief bill is currently going through both houses of Congress here in the United States. By the time this video comes out, it may well have been passed by both houses of Congress. This is a long-awaited relief bill. It also has earmarked a $15 billion fund for independent movie chains and live music venues. Now, they're not separated. It's $15 billion for both, but it is a glimmer of hope to know that there is some earmarked money for theater owners. They don't have to go into the big pool with everyone else as they're trying to get relief. There are some preconditions, however, on these funds. First of all, in order to be eligible, the venue has to prove that their revenue has declined by at least 25% from the previous year. My guess is that most theater owners are going to be able to show that. I don't know too many theater owners that have had a decline of 25% or less. Also, the owner, there are a few different categories, and the owner of the venue cannot belong to more than two of these categories, and that is a publicly traded company. AMC, Regal, etc. are publicly traded companies. They cannot operate in more than one country. That would be the bigger chains, AMC, Regal, etc. or operate in more than 10 U.S. states. So that right there disqualifies most of the big theater chains, the big three, if you will, here in the United States. This is targeted relief for smaller chains. The companies cannot have more than 500 full-time employees, and they cannot have received at least 10% of their revenue from government sources. Now, keep in mind, you can qualify in 2 or more of these categories, but more than 2, and you will not be eligible for this $15 billion targeted relief fund. So, like I said, great news if you own and operate a movie theater like the Vista, my favorite movie theater in Los Angeles, which is just I think they have, the company they run that runs them has 2 locations, and they're both within about 2 miles of each other. I would imagine perhaps, depending on how many employees, and I'm not really sure, perhaps if you are a chain the size of an Alamo Draft House, you may be eligible for that. This is a step in the right direction, and at least there is some relief potentially available for these venues. Now, of course, there will be a lot of people, because as I said, this is movie theaters and live venues, live music, etc. But hopefully there will be a process that could help keep some of these places afloat, because I would hate for theaters to reopen whenever they do reopen and to find a landscape that is devoid of many of the independent theater chains that are the lifeblood of a lot of different communities, whether there is a big theater chain in them or not. Let's take a look back at when the theatrical business was much healthier than it is right now. And when we looked at that list of the top Japanese films of all time, there's a movie that appeared in that list. And as a matter of fact, it's a movie that was, for some time, the highest grossing film domestically and worldwide. And that is Titanic. On this weekend, 23 years ago, Titanic began its record-breaking run to the top of the all-time box office charts. But this is something I always forget. Look at that week 1 gross. Titanic did not open with $100 million. As a matter of fact, Titanic was a few James Bond fans away from having a weird footnote in the history books of being the top grossing film of all time that opened in second place, because Titanic was at number 1 with $28.6 million. Tomorrow Never Dies, Pierce Brosnan's second outing as James Bond, was right behind it in its first week with $25.1 million. So that was a little too close for comfort if you're Titanic. Of course, it stayed on top and continued to blaze a box office trail well into 1998, sailing to the top of the number 1 all-time list. At number 3, Scream 2 in its second week with a healthy $13.9 million gross. In its first week at number 4, Nathan Lane and Lee Evans in Mouse Hunt. I remember seeing it barely. That was the number 4 film that week, the week that Titanic came out. And in its fourth week, in 5th place, Robin Williams, the late, great Robin Williams, in Flubber, Disney's Flubber, at $4.2 million. And much like last weekend, we are going to highlight several other films that came out this weekend in box office history. Usually we'll single out a few, but because it is the end of the year and this is a time when a lot of studios put out their biggest films and a lot of their award contenders, then I wanted to highlight several movies that came out this weekend. The first one being 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was the first feature-length animated film from Walt Disney. That was released this week in 1937. The 51st weekend of the year in 1946, Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life was released. If you want to know more about It's a Wonderful Life, you can find it on my podcast, All My Movies, which comes out on Wednesday. And my guest is going to be film critic and historian Leonard Maltin. Oh my God, that is so amazingly crazy and fun that he was on the show. I love It's a Wonderful Life. If you love It's a Wonderful Life, check out the podcast. It'll be out in a couple days. In 1965, Dr. Zhivago was released. That would go on to win Best Picture. In 1966, the classic Clint Eastwood Western, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was released here in North America. In 1967, The Graduate, which part of a radical series of films that completely changed the face of the movie industry here domestically, came out. In 1974, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather Part 2, which would win Best Picture, came out. In 1988, Rain Man, which would win Best Picture, came out with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. The first Scream film was released in 1996. In 1999, Galaxy Quest was released. And if you have Amazon Prime, or apparently if you are a cable subscriber and you have the History Channel Vault, The documentary that we made while I was at Screen Junkies and Fandom is available on Amazon Prime and History Channel Vault. A Never Surrender Galaxy Quest documentary. Very proud of our work on that, so you can check that out. 2001 to 2003, each of those weekends successively, 3 years in a row, the Lord of the Rings trilogy was released. Oh boy, do I remember. Oh, I love those movies so much. In 2009, James Cameron loves this weekend. In 2009, Avatar was released. It would go on to be the highest grossing film of all time. And then back in 2015, hard to believe, but 5 years ago, Star Wars The Force Awakens set a record for the highest opening weekend of all time. That would later be supplanted by Avengers Endgame. 5 years ago, the new Star Wars, the Disney era of Star Wars began. What a long, strange trip it's been since then. Let's look at the top 10 for people that are watching things at home, and we'll start with Amazon. The number one film on Amazon, as I mentioned, The Croods: A New Age, not only available in theaters, but now available for you to rent or purchase at home, or actually I think it might just be rent at this point. It's the number one film. At number two, Greenland, a new Gerard Butler film. And oh boy, nothing makes me more curious than those 5 words, a new Gerard Butler film. Is at the number 2 spot. At number 3, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, The Grinch, and Songbird, all holdovers from last week, as well as the rest of the top 10. Prancer, Love and Monsters, A Christmas Carol 1999, starring Sir Patrick Stewart, Let Him Go at number 9, and Freaky at number 10. Let's check out iTunes and see what people are watching there. The Croods: A New Age is number 1 there as well, followed by Tenet, which is beginning its run on 4K, Blu-ray, premium video on demand, etc. Then Greenland there at number 3, followed by The Elf. The Grinch, which is a new entry to the iTunes charts. We've seen it in several other charts. It's now at number 5. I think it just might have rotated off of Netflix, which may be why you're seeing it on iTunes. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Love Actually, and The Polar Express at number 6, 7, and 8. Hunter x Hunter at number 9. We've seen that movie pop up here and there already this year. And then The War with Grandpa, which is another movie that had a pretty long run in theaters, now available for you to rent and watch at home. That's there at number 10. And finally, let's see what people are watching on Netflix. At number 1 is an awards contender, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is getting a lot of awards season buzz, not least for Chadwick Boseman, its star, the late, great Chadwick Boseman, who we sadly lost earlier this year. It is number 1. At number 2 is A California Christmas. Netflix makes Christmas movies almost as much as Hallmark does, because there's another Christmas film there. At number 3, How the Grinch Stole Christmas from Ron Howard. At number 4, Braven, which is a Rambo type film that I strangely saw in a theater. I'm pretty sure during the Movie Pass days when we would just go see everything starring Jason Momoa. If you're looking for a Jason Momoa fighting in the snow movie, you could do a lot worse than Braven. I'll just say that. At number 5 is Christmas Chronicles 2. Ava is number 6. The original Christmas Chronicles is at number 7. At number 8 is Guest House, which is a 2020 release that is now hitting Netflix. At number 9, The Prom, and Peppermint at number 10. We've seen Peppermint on the charts. Again, I think people think that it's a Christmas film when it is very much not. But I guess a lot of people rooting on Jennifer Garner, and what's wrong with that? And before I wrap up, I just wanted to give a little gift recommendation if you're still looking for something, particularly somebody who might like comic book films or somebody who's around my age. This is not a paid promotion. This is just me wanting to share something really cool from some really cool people, by the way. There's a new book that came out not too long ago. It's called X-Men, The Art and Making of the Animated Series. It's put together by Eric and Julia Lewald, who were the showrunners and really huge parts of what made X-Men, the Animated Series happen, which was the entry for so many kids, including myself back in the 90s, to not just X-Men, but comic books, Marvel, etc. They put out a book, an oral history of the show called Previously on X-Men a couple years ago, or a few years ago. That was a great read. This is such an awesome book because it goes through the development of the entire series, and it includes pictures, art, etc., storyboards. If you love the show and you really want to know how it was made, or you really want to know just going into the history of it, and also just reliving this great art. I still love how this show was animated and how everything about this show was done and produced so well in bringing the X-Men to life at a time when there wasn't a whole lot of interest in doing a lot of comic book related things. It goes into the show, the legacy, etc., its impact on X-Men, its impact on pop culture. It is such a great book, and as I mentioned, Eric and Julia Lewald are two of the nicest people you could hope to meet. They say never meet your heroes. This is the opposite side. Meet your heroes, because I hope that they're as nice as Eric and Julia have been over the years to me while I was at Screen Junkies, while we were fandom, after I've left. They are really just wonderful people, and this is a great book. If you like X-Men, if you love the show, this is such an amazing book to read and to go through. Probably not enough time to get it shipped to you for Christmas. Maybe it is, but definitely time to get it for someone if you're looking for a gift idea. You can buy it online, Amazon, wherever books are sold, etc. But just a recommendation for me of a really great book and a really great look back at one of my favorite shows growing up. Also, as I mentioned, if you want even more of what I'm doing here, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. And I would like to thank these producers. These are some of my producer level patrons. We just did a Schmodown Inner Geekdom study session this past weekend. That was a lot of fun. We also do commentaries, watch-alongs. There's a lot going on over on Patreon at all different levels, but these producer patrons really are so much fun to hang out and talk with and watch this community as it's grown throughout the year. So we love to have you over there. And as I mentioned, don't forget to tune into my podcast, All My Movies. This week, we're going to be talking about It's a Wonderful Life with my very special guest, Leonard Maltin, film critic and historian. I'm so excited for everyone to hear that interview, almost as excited as I was to do the interview. And as always, thank you so much for watching me here. It's going to be a busy week here on the channel. I've got a review of Disney's Soul, which will be uploaded at some point tomorrow, possibly tomorrow morning. And it looks like there will be a review of Wonder Woman 1984 that I'm going to try to get to you just as soon as I'm able to. So look for reviews of both of those. Those are both options that you can watch at home on Christmas Day. For some folks, they could go see Wonder Woman 1984 if it's safe and there's a theater open near you. I would appreciate it if you would check those out. Many people checked out my review for the Mandalorian season finale. Some of you agreed with me, some of you didn't agree with me. There's a room for all kinds of opinions, and really it's gotten people excited about Star Wars again, and it certainly has gotten me excited about the future, even if there were some things in this one episode that I didn't quite like. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you back here with my reviews this week. Have a happy and safe week leading up to the holidays and the end of the year, and I'll see you next time.